Oh, there I am. Hi, everybody. And thank you so much, June, and thanks everyone for joining us here today. I'm Bob Safian. I'm the former editor of Fast Company, and I host the rapid response episodes of Masters of Scale. If any of you've listened to them, we're going to do a little rapid response live here this morning. There are themes of rapid response that are threaded throughout the summit program, so you'll hear them all the way through, but we're going to do kind of a live talk show that can start things off. Now, Blake gave us some very optimistic beginnings. We've had kind of an unprecedented era, and rapid response was created to help us address that. And just as a short video reminder of how and why we call this an unprecedented era, we have a little video to play. So, Carrie, if you want to. Kind of bracing, right? When you see it all like that. Like, did we really make it through all of that? Did we do that? We did, right? But there's still a lot for us to still make our way through, and we're going to have a couple of guests here to help start setting the stage for talking about that. I'm going to invite up our first guest. He has a terrific experience with dealing with lots of challenges and changes over many years. He's the former CEO of Merck, currently the company's chairman. He's also chairs the health assurances initiatives at General Catalyst venture capital firm and is an advocate for health equity. Please welcome Ken Frazier up to the stage. I love that I have this table and these cards, you know, so I can feel like
Jimmy
Fallon. Supposed to do?
Jimmy Fallon.
Jimmy Fallon. I know. After that setup, it's hard to go right to the comedy right away.
Right, exactly.
But we'll try. Ken, thanks for joining us. So, unprecedented times, right? And now you've guided businesses through a lot of cycles. 9/11, the Great Recession, pandemic now. When you and I have talked previously about rapid responses, you focused on following principles that you know, when you're under pressure, it's important to do the right thing. And I wonder, what does doing the right thing mean, especially in situations that are all new? Like, how do you know what the right thing is?
So I'd start by saying that I don't know what the right thing is all the time. And I think one of the most important lessons that leaders can learn going through this kind of upheaval is that the old-fashioned concept of top-down decision-making just does not work. So, you know, usually people think that CEOs have to be quick and decisive. When the pandemic hit, I thought that was exactly the wrong way to approach it. We needed to be much more reflective, much more empathetic. We had to become much better listeners, and we needed to empower our people to make the decisions that were necessary for our business and, importantly, for their own lives, since there was no longer a stark difference between work and people's personal lives.
I mean, there is the stereotype of a CEO that's like, I may be wrong, but I'm never in doubt, right? You're just going to go all the time. And what you're saying is, like, sometimes you have to know when you have to listen.
Absolutely. You know, for example, we were talking about earlier with Satya about this whole issue about working and people coming back to work. And we had 70% of our employees weren't able to work from home. We make life-saving medicines. So back there in March 2020, we had our production workers and our researchers working all the time, making life-saving medicines. You know, I'm very proud of the fact that during that period of time, what we call our line item fill rate, which is the amount of orders that were filled completely and on time, it actually went up during that period. It's because people were dedicated to the purpose of the company.
And that's where you start. You and I talked also about after George Floyd was murdered in 2020, which you've described as a turning point, as many other people have. You and your friend and colleague Ken Chenault launched 110, which is a business coalition, if I have this right, to create 1 million family-sustaining jobs for Black Americans
who lack a 4-year degree. That's important.
In that moment, you chose to lean into, very business economic things, even though it was a social upheaval, a social moment. Why do you believe that business has to act on social issues like this?
So first of all, on the 110 issue, you look at our country, we have like 11 million open jobs. And the fact of the matter is, if we take a skills-first approach rather than a credentials-based approach, we can train and develop people to have those kinds of family-sustaining jobs. But to answer your question about business people and social issues, my own personal view of it is that most of my CEO colleagues don't want to get involved in political disputes. Very clear that they don't want to get involved in political disputes. But it is also equally clear that for business to succeed, we need a climate. And that climate can't just be one that's conducive to business and commerce. It has to be conducive to people. And that climate includes certain things that we sort of say are intrinsic to our country, right? So let's say, it's important to have the consistent rule of law. It's important to have a democracy where people can vote. It's important. Thank you. It's important to have fairness, impartial justice, equal opportunity. It's important to have respect for private property. All of those things are things that we care about, fairness, decency, morality, civility. My view of it is that when government abandons or fails in those basic responsibilities, we citizens, including business leaders, have an obligation to do something about it.
And for the business leaders that are out here, like if there's a social issue or something that's come up, but they're worried this is going to hurt my business. I may not make as much money. I'm going to alienate some potential clients, some potential customers. My board might be upset about what's the answer to tell them about when you have that, that conflict?
Well, so first of all, I don't think business people need to speak on every social issue. I want to be very clear. You need to ask yourself, is this an issue that's important to your company's values? Have you earned the right to speak to it? So, for example, an issue that I care very much about is health disparities. I work in a company that does cutting-edge research. We're thrilled that we've sequenced the human genome. Satya was talking about the importance of the work that they're doing to figure out how to better code information. It's changed our society. We're now coding genes. But the reality of the world is your zip code is more determinative of your health than your genetic code is. And I think that a company like Merck that spends the time and effort to work on developing better health care ought to be focused not only on developing the next treatment for the people who can afford it. We have to think about health care for those people who live in those zip codes. We talked about the pandemic, right? One of the things about the pandemic is it laid bare a problem that we've had. Talk about problems that are in plain sight. Income inequality has been in plain sight in this country for 50 years. Since the 70s, we've seen a huge divergence between worker productivity and worker wages. And so, when we were looking at those very dark images up there, it was tough for us. But the reality of the world is, for many Americans, there was tragic loss of life, loss of income, loss of any economic security. And I believe that leadership has to be equitable leadership going forward. If we're going to rebuild our society, if we're going to rebuild our country, we have to rebuild it in a way that actually works for all of our people, not just our narrow business interests.
And we haven't necessarily learned that lesson of health equity from this experience.
No, not at all. And we saw life expectancy significantly reduced, particularly for brown and black people in this country. But we're seeing the same issue with respect to people all across the country. And I think it's really important for us as business leaders, again, to be equitable leaders, not just normal business leaders.
Oh, that's great. Ken, you are on the board lead director at ExxonMobil when Russia invaded Ukraine. So you are pushing them to sort of suspend operations and pull out of Russia. And I want to ask you a little bit about that. But we have another guest that maybe I'll bring up at the same time, if that's okay. Who has been in the front lines of dealing with difficult decisions around Ukraine. She's the CEO who leads the global workforce platform Upwork. So if we can please welcome Hayden Brown to come join us up here also. Hi, Hayden. Join us. Thanks, Hayden.
Thanks for having me.
This is great. I know I want to ask you about Ukraine and have you both talk a little bit about your perspective about Ukraine and how businesses should react to it. But I want to ask you first, you took over as CEO of Upwork just as the pandemic hit, when we were all transformed work habits in ways that kind of reinforced Upwork's model. So kind of tough times as good times, ironically. I mean, there must have been a strange start and an unexpected twist maybe to your plans coming in.
Absolutely. I've been at the company for 11 years, but stepped into the CEO role right as the pandemic was about to begin. And definitely, I've only known, to be leading the company through basically a series of crises, as was depicted on the video. But we have our mission, which is to create economic opportunities so people have better lives. We have leaned into that mission every step of the way. And really, as the pandemic was descending, it felt like we were a business that was built for this moment, because our entire platform is about connecting talent all over the world with work opportunities that they can do remotely with clients. And so as March and April of 2020 were happening, we looked around and said, how can we help? How can we do more with our platform to bring work opportunities to people where they are, and also help businesses who are suddenly trying to work remotely, which we ourselves have been doing for 20 years, figure out how to do this? Because obviously we are experts at this, and many were calling us saying, what do I do? I didn't know how to do remote work, and now I'm suddenly doing that with my entire operation overnight. So it was a transformational time, certainly, and now I think the way that 70+% of businesses have said remote work is here to stay, it is part of their core strategy, that really sets the stage, I think, for us and our business continuing to help businesses kind of through this next chapter. As Satya was saying, work has changed, I think, permanently. The genie's out of the bottle, and the next phase is about experimenting and really designing work to be better.
So you're there, you get through the first bit of being CEO at this company and pandemic, and then Russia invades Ukraine, and you're faced with a new conundrum because a bunch of your users, a lot of your market is in Russia and Belarus, right? Ken, you had the situation with ExxonMobil, which we'll get to also. You have this question, do you join the boycotts or not? And there are users, if I understand it right, that were kind of pleading with you not to boycott, not to shut down.
Yes, 10% of our business and our customers were in Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus. And so this was a core issue for us. Our own talent also, 10% of our own team was on the ground in those three markets. And so we were getting lobbying on both sides. And this was something that, cut to the roots of our business. We've had these teams there since the beginning, and it was an incredibly difficult decision. We weighed this decision, looking at the customer issues, looking at the operational realities. Could we pay people in those regions ongoingly? Would there be cybersecurity issues? Electricity being ongoing. Would customers want to continue to transact, and would they be able to? So we had to make some really difficult decisions. I think your comments about making swift decisions in some cases, and then also weighing and moving carefully and slowly, as you did in the pandemic, was how we were operating as well. So we moved quickly to pay our own talent in the region a month's wages in advance so that they could actually buy food, water, gasoline. We made the decision ultimately that we would have to suspend our operations in Russia and Belarus. And that was due to both operational concerns and, frankly, moral concerns. We looked at both of those and concluded we would do a full-scale suspension in both of those markets after having taken a lot of care and consideration and having actually supported the evacuation of team members who were able to leave the region, which was a key concern.
And as I understand it, Ukrainians responded very like your business out of Ukraine grew, right? Like that.
It did, and this was really the silver lining. I mean, these things have been obviously horrific to see in terms of what this war has done, but we launched some new products that actually supported people being able to make free donations to Ukrainian talent on the ground there. And the silver lining has been Ukrainians were able to take their work on our platform with them wherever they went in the country as they were moving to safer zones. And also because so much of the Ukrainian economy was getting hammered with jobs disappearing locally in the ground, what we saw was Ukrainians working on our platform were actually supporting their entire community and pods of family and friends because our work was a lifeline for them and their families. So this was a huge, there was actually an increase to kind of peak levels of Ukrainian engagement and employment through Upwork throughout this period, and that has continued to this day.
Ken, I mean, ExxonMobil had billions of dollars invested, right? I mean, that decision, and you were encouraging of the decision to pull out, even though those resources were going to be put at risk.
Yeah, well, you know, there's no use in having principle if you're not going to exercise it because it costs you something. And I'm very, very proud of the management and my former board members at Exxon. You know, Exxon's installation at Sakhalin 1 in the North Pacific was the single largest outside investment in all of Russia. And we all know that the oil and gas that was being produced there was funding directly Putin's war machine. And so Exxon pulled out. As you may have seen in the last couple of days, Russia's providing no compensation for taking over those facilities, but it was the right thing to do. Merck, we have a different issue. We've pulled out except for vital, underscored, vital medicines. Because, for example, if people have cancer in Russia, we don't feel morally that we can make a decision that we know with certainty will extinguish a patient's life. But we don't provide comfort medicines. I think history will judge people harshly if they aid and abet Putin. And I'm very proud of the business community for pulling out.
You gave an analogy at one point about your father and his work at UPS, and that making the right choices was sort of something that you harked back on in making this decision?
Yeah, well, you know, I was very fortunate to have great parents, but one of the things I think you're referring to is that, you know, in the early 60s when my father was working at UPS made a decision then not to have segregated units in the South, washrooms, facilities. Today, I think we all pretend that we would have had the guts to have made that decision. But in reality, we're facing those decisions right now. Our society is unraveling, and I think business has a really important role to play. I'll just say very quickly, we all live in enclaves of people like ourselves. Our children, therefore, go to school with children that are the children of people like us. We go to mosque and synagogue and church with people that are like us. We consume media with people who agree with us. I believe business is the last place in this country where you can't necessarily choose who you associate and you work with. And we have to be leaders.
You know, as we're talking, I'm reminded that there's someone in the, we're talking about Ukraine, and there's someone in the audience who I want to recognize, if you'll let me. Her name is Ilona Misko, and she is an entrepreneur who came here from Kyiv. She runs a business called Fuel Finance. She's right here. Ilona she runs her business out of, sometimes out of a bomb shelter. Missile landed about 400 meters from her apartment last week. We may have a picture of it somewhere we can show you guys. So thank you for joining us here. I'm curious how rapid response feels for entrepreneurs in Ukraine right now.
First of all, I think that we have joked with Ukrainian entrepreneurs that we will be the best risk managers in the world after that. Yeah, and it's funny, but on the other hand, it's really challenging because you should manage the team, you should manage the people, you should know how to hear people, and it's mainly about some type of family, business, everything, like at the same time. But on the other hand, we see that you will not see Ukrainian entrepreneurs crying. So because we're all fighters, and I believe that we understand that crying, it's not the way we will support our country. And we understand that our battlefield today is Ukrainian economy. And it was like my first question. Okay, I have business, I have team, and many other startup founders from Ukraine. So they have the situation, okay, we should fight, we should pay taxes, we should pay salaries, and we simply should do our best now because it's our battlefield. And I believe it's exactly what we do now. We donate, we create projects because I found somehow that have technical teams, we can create different platforms which can support Ukrainians now. And it was really awesome. And we have many funds which were created by product communities, by product managers. And they really do now subscription with donations. So it's something awesome when you see fund which is operates like startup. So it's really cool. And in that way, I think we live now like that. Yeah, we're working from bomb shelters. We have explosions. We plan meetings for the day when was explosion, but on the other hand, we're still growing, we're still operating, support each other. And first of all, I want to say thank you so much for stop working with Russia. And for us, it's very important. So, and we feel that support from all companies, from the US. And first of all, thank you all for that. We appreciate it a lot.
Thank you, Mom. Thank you very much. You have a question? She has a question for you guys.
Yeah, also I have a question. So what do you think, okay, we live in this crisis, we have this problem, and sometimes it's very complicated to think about planning and how far ahead we should plan. So what do you think about that? Thank you.
I think, thank you, first of all, and thank you for being here and sharing those comments. I think, first of all, as we've gone through so many of these crises, and this one in particular, which has caused us to, I think, see that navigating any crisis like this is a moment when we can either create strength in our cultural fabrics or tear it apart inside of our companies, and especially in companies where we have Ukrainians as part of our communities. So as we think about planning and navigating these kinds of crises, we can't see around all of the corners ahead, but I think to kind of what Ken, you were saying, we have to make decisions that stand the test of time. And while we can't plan for all the eventualities, we have to make decisions that may not be popular in the moment with everyone and may not be well received by all of the constituents that are out there on social media and everywhere else, but certainly give our constituents that are in our employees, our customers, our shareholders, visibility into what we're going to do. And I think that's how we have to approach these things in terms of giving everyone the visibility into here's our decision framework, here's how we're approaching this problem or this opportunity in the crisis, and here's what you can expect from us. And that's what we tried to do with our decision, is to give our customers forward visibility into how we would be making decisions. When we announced our suspension, we also gave them a lot of runway in terms of what that would look like so that they could plan. Because the last thing we wanted was to have events descending and forcing decisions on us and our customers more than necessary, so that then they would be surprised. And I think that's what you have to do in these situations.
Thank you. There's another audience member who I'm going to pester here. Get up, Jonathan.
Hello.
Get up. How are you? This is Jonathan Millenhall, who's the former CMO of Airbnb and founder of 21st Century Brand. He's also a board member at GoFundMe, at Fanatics, and most importantly for this question, at Peloton. Now, there are a lot of businesses that have dealt with whipsawing demand over the last 2 years, none more maybe publicly than Peloton. Can you share with us anything about how you think about what rapid response has been required and is required at Peloton?
Yeah, of course. Peloton will go down as one of the case stories of pre-pandemic success, then pandemic boom, and then having to right-size the business as we're coming out of pandemic, and the natural demand has gone back, excuse me, to pre-pandemic levels. And so the first leadership team during the pandemic were making so many decisions, strategic decisions, to meet demand. And that demand was an expectation from employees, shareholders, and ultimately customers. But then as the demand fell back, we've got a new leadership team coming in, and we're looking at some of the decisions that were made by the previous leadership team. And now we have to think about how do we undo some of those decisions so we can right the cost base for the business And for Peloton, it's going to be much more about being able to be very, very nimble and have a variable cost base that can meet some of the demands that are impacted by all of the big themes that every business has been affected by, which you just showed in that film.
Yeah, so a variable cost base, because some of the decisions early on when there was growth was not necessarily emphasizing variable cost base because it was more expensive.
That's exactly right. So when you're making some long-term commitments to try and own more of your supply chain and more of the manufacturing processes, you're actually embedding long-term cost into the business, which now the Peloton business needs to unwind from.
Right, which makes it seem like it's cheaper, but it's not necessarily. Do you have a question you want to ask?
Yeah, Ken, you've served as a CEO and a board member, and during times of crisis, I'd be very interested in what do you expect as a CEO from your board, and also what do you expect from the board to the CEO and the leadership team during times of crisis?
So I think there's a real benefit to having frequent interactions with your board. I think I was very fortunate to have a board that was full of very different, diverse people with different experiences. And the more we talked during that period, the more input I got. And by the way, the more they understood what management was contending with. So for me, it's the transparency, it's the openness. It's like I was saying with the employees. It's understanding their needs, our investors' needs, our employees' needs, and being able to talk about those things on a regular basis.
So we've covered some of the ground that we've had to deal with in the last 2 years. We only have 2 minutes left. So the one thing I want to ask about very quickly is the future of work, which was touched on earlier, right? That we'll delve into this topic more as the summit evolves. But you're both experts in this from different experiences. Can you share a brief assessment about what you think has happened and where we're moving? Quickly, though.
Yeah.
We only have a minute. You only have a couple seconds.
Such a simple topic.
Yeah, exactly.
Look, I think there's a great video shown earlier that I think gets to one of my main views on this, which is the world woke up during the pandemic to the fact that remote work is possible. And in a world of remote work, we've got to stop actually talking about where the work is happening, because that's really about who. When you blow out the doors on where the work can happen, and it doesn't have to all be in the office, certainly there are types of work where it does have to be in the office, but for a lot of work, it doesn't have to be in the office or in your local region, and you can start to bring other workers with different demographic backgrounds, different skill sets, all kinds of attributes into your workforce. That completely changes the game. It helps you solve diversity challenges, it helps you solve skill set challenges, and when you focus on who and how the work is happening, which speaks to what Satya mentioned earlier, what that video was about earlier, that is really the challenge and the opportunity that we have to really redesign work to be better for businesses and better for talent. And I'm a huge optimist on this, and I think that is where we as business leaders need to focus our time and energy. Stop talking about where, start talking about who and how the work is happening.
As you're giving that answer, I'm thinking, Ken, about what you said earlier about, like, there's more diversity, but how do you bring that diversity together, right? And not just remote.
Yeah, I think that's a big challenge. I think, first of all, people are skeptical about institutions, whether they're talking about governmental institutions or business institutions. I think it's not just about where people work. It's about how do we meet humans' needs. I'm very worried about our society unraveling right now, and we see it around the world. That's what happens when institutions, including businesses, are not meeting people's needs.
Well, that's the exhortation to all of you out there, here in the theater and on the live stream, that we've got to take this responsibility and this mantle and create the future that we want, not just for ourselves and for our bank accounts and for our investors, but for our world. I want to thank you both for joining us, and thanks everyone, and thanks very much. Thank you guys, that was great.
What's said at the summit stays at the summit.
Everybody will have to pay attention.
Almost no one sees this coming. Those founders are becoming more globally ambitious. They're coming after your talent, your capital, your market share.
The difficulty is when a team has been working so hard on one thing.
If you are trying to use your time and your talent and your money in the service of others, the work will never end.
We have to deal with inequities.
It's different if you're a founder, but when you walk into something so big and so perfect and so successful, you know, it's not about me. It's about me becoming a part of it and just evolving it and making it better.
The thing that I love about it, and that makes me so optimistic, is that it's just creating more dialogue.
I'm here to tell you that, wow, human innovation's incredible.
This is Masters of Scale Summit.